course, the initiative that you've taken as a school, uh, just a moment, yeah, is praiseworthy, I have to say, because schools have now closed for all practical purposes, but you all have gone one step ahead to maintain this connect with the parent community, and that's so important in times like these. So, having said that, I'm going to put up my presentation for people to see. I'm going to share this, and is that visible to everybody?
It is visible,
It
Dr.
is
Sen.
visible? Okay, all right, all right. So today's session is about parenting in the times of this pandemic, yeah? So just to be able to wrap our heads around what this really means for us, this pandemic of COVID-19. Indeed, it's a phenomena which is brought our world upside down, really, right? These are unprecedented times, and I don't think we've ever seen a crisis like this in our lifetimes. And it has taken away, through this constant and palpable threat and fear, some of which is, of course, real, and some quite imagined, I believe. It's taken away the feeling of safety and security that we so take for granted. And instead, it is thrown at us these unsettling questions of life and death. So the closest that I can, liken it to, is a phenomena like a natural disaster. Indeed, it is a huge natural disaster, like a massive earthquake or a tsunami, but at a global scale, at a scale which has affected every corner of the world. And clearly, as a response to that, the natural response is to protect ourselves physically, and that's what we've done across the world, pretty much across the world. Most nations have gone into this mode of lockdown. But the lockdown has had its own consequences. And I think that we need to have a look at what that means really. What has it done to us? Not just the physical threat of the virus, but, the consequences of the lockdown itself, right? So what are the consequences of the lockdown? Let's have a look at that, right? First and foremost is a disruption of daily life. Now, you know how we take things for granted and we think that these are mundane things that we do, wake up in the morning, children are, get ready, go to school, come back in the afternoon, have their lunch in their comfort and security of their homes. They do their homework, go out to play, come back again and wait for mom and dad to perhaps return from work, feel like a family again, do some, rituals, have a dinner together, maybe watch something on TV together, whatever that might be. And then move on. And then again, weekends are different. You connect with your cousins or friends, go out to the mall or catch a movie and so on. Now, these have gone out of the window, right? And in the beginning, when they started, many children and indeed some parents as well were quite thrilled that, oh my God, we don't have to go to school again, anymore for some time at least. And parents are there all the time with us. What fun times. But I can tell you that within 2 to 4 weeks time, it all came crashing down. Once the parents realized that the children their sleep time is going from 10 o'clock to 12 to 2 in the morning, the eating patterns went out of the window. They started rubbing each other on the wrong side. There were, conflicts and flare-ups and tantrums by the children. And that's when they started reaching out to us and say, oh my God, what do we do with this? So this routine, the rituals, that gives us a structure. It makes things predictable for us, and that's very comforting actually, to know what's coming, to wake up with a sense of purpose in the morning. And that completely went away. And therefore, there's this loss of invisible connections and a form of, scaffolding that we have, which gives us emotional safety. That went away. And then, of course, there was institutional breakdown. Schools and colleges closed down, offices closed down. People, many of them were threatened with the prospect of losing their jobs. Some had massive pay cuts. And of course, everything closed down. Public transport did. And, people who, let's say, simply crossed the border between Gurgaon and Delhi. I have, our father is 93 years old and is really ill, and he needs frequent visits from us. I live in Delhi, but my brother lives in Gurgaon. And for 2.5 months, he couldn't cross the border. And of course, there was no public transport at all, right? And people who wanted to even avail of simple things like healthcare or, getting something essential for home could not do that anymore. And that led to a huge sense of letdown. And, this anchor that we, take for granted, in the form of all these institutions that hold society together, that completely, fell apart. And then we started asking these questions that what is it, this huge sense of disappointment and disbelief that this can happen to us. And then of course there was loss of pleasure and joy. So again, we take this for granted as well, that we can at the press of a button order the food that we want to, or we can go for a morning walk so easily, catch a coffee with a friend, or go to a museum, wait for our favorite artist to come to town, and on top of that, celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, milestones, and a large part of our lives, in fact, indeed our identity is based on the choices, these choices that we make of who to connect with, what spaces to go to. And that again got taken away completely. So there was this deep disconnect with the sense of self, this collective that we often thrive in, the sense of community and the meaning in life. Yeah. And a lot of that comes from these spaces, and that went away. And all we were left with our own family and the digital world, right? Which of course we've tried our best to exploit, but I think that in many instances it may not, it's probably a poor substitute, right? So what did it do? It gave us a range of emotions of frustration, helplessness, disbelief, hopelessness, and indeed a sense of loss, grief, and sadness, right? And and most of all, it gave us huge amounts of fear and anxiety about what's going to happen. This uncertainty that we still face is continuing to give us this fear and anxiety. So what do we do in the face of it? What do we do with our children? How do we help them? How can we best help our children to, just a moment, please. Yeah. Yeah. How can we best equip our children? Should we still continue to teach them calculus? Yeah. Teach them how to read well or write well? Or should we, in this climate, teach them about cybercrime because they're constantly in that space? Or what about anger management? And that I'm sure some of your parents must be beginning to tackle more and more, right? Or prepare them for a nuclear disaster or tsunami, or perhaps the next pandemic. Who knows what's coming our way? What about sexual abuse and crime against women, right? And what about this materialistic culture that we were caught in, this warped politics and corrupt despite everything? What do we do, right? Or should we prepare them to be adaptive, emotionally intelligent, right? Change with the times, think on their feet, and be creative about life itself? Should we prepare them to ask questions and find their own answers rather than answer questions that we ask? Because indeed, what do we know about what's going to happen in their lives in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Could anybody have imagined what's happening, leave alone the pandemic? But 20 years back, did we know that we'll be so digitally driven that our lives, our gadgets will be like another limb, Did anybody know that our life is going to change? So who's going to ever predict what's going to happen in 20 years time? So what are we preparing them for? What are we teaching them indeed, right? And those are questions which are paramount importance right now, right? So I'm going to share with you our philosophy that we follow as children first, about what works for children to learn, to develop, and grow up as mature, wholesome individuals, right? So the first thing that we look at is accepting the fact that each brain, each child is wired and inspired differently. So there is absolutely no doubt that every child will come with their sets of strengths, and there will be some relative weaknesses, right? And however hard we try, we cannot change that hard wiring. It's like the hard drive of a computer. I mean, if a computer is made for gaming, it'll take the gaming softwares very well, but it may not do the office work that well. And similarly, an office computer is not going to do that. So if a child is an introvert, however hard you push that child, you will not make her an extrovert. In fact, what you'll probably do is push them to become unhappy and depressed, right? And similar to that, if a child is struggling to do maths, he cannot become a chartered accountant, right? And if he has a disability in maths, he can better it. He can definitely better it. I'm not saying that you need to completely ignore that bit, but what you need to focus on are where indeed are the talents and strengths that a child comes with. And sometimes those may be unconventional, and yet it is important to hold on to that. So the first idea is this, the first philosophy of ours is that we should accept that each child is different, right? Connect is prerequisite to learning. And when I say connect, it's about the relationship that you share with your child. Yeah. And the relationship, as you might know, and you might have seen, even in school, people in school might have seen that a child thrives in one class and the next year could become a disaster. And what makes that happen is a connect with the teacher. It's a relationship they share. It's how safe they feel in the company of the teacher and that that class atmosphere. Similar to that in at home too. The parent who's able to build that relationship and the connect is the one who probably is going to be more effective in helping children to grow up in a healthy manner. And we will spend a lot of time discussing connect as we go along. The next point is that what you focus on grows. And again, we are going to spend some more time with this. Kids will do well if they can, right? And that's another belief that we hold on to. Because if a child is actually not doing something in class or at home, there must be something that is preventing the child from doing it. Now, the child, as they grow up, might begin to find reasons for it, right? For instance, if a child is not completing classwork, after some time, by the time they come to high school, they might say, I'm not bothered about academics really. It's not my scene. So I actually don't do it. But if you dig deeper, you'll find that there is beneath that, there is something that has caused it in the first place. No child wants to be reprimanded, called out in class or at home, or criticized for what they cannot do. So if they can do it, they will do it, because that's what the human tendency is for, is to live up to expectations. It's to get that praise and positive feedback. The fifth point is emotionally safe zone is a prerequisite for learning and growth. Again, that's something that we often do not in our, the humdrum of life or the mad race that we sometimes get into, don't realize what we might be doing to the atmosphere in which children grow up. And sometimes they do not feel safe to ask questions, to take chances, to grow up in the way they could have done, right? And the last point is that it's an inside out approach. And by that we mean that it's not about the kids. If things are not working out, if there's a conflict, if there's tension, if your child is not listening to you, or if is acting out or answering back, then the best thing to do is to look within and ask yourself, what is it that I am doing which is causing this? Yeah. What is it that has shifted in terms of my own feelings or my attitude or expectations that is causing this? And if you're able to correct that, then maximum chances are that that thing that was really was like a dissonance will gradually go away, and you'll find the solutions. So let's look at that from that lens and look at the parenting model that we follow. And we call it the 5C model. As you can see, there's connect, coach, community, commit, and care. And these are the 5 C's we often focus on when we talk about parenting. Connect is central, as you can see, and connect is what we were talking about. It's a relationship. So what is connect, right? Let's consider the case of, let's say, Shiv, who's 11, right? Shiv is very bright and energetic and full of imagination and is very creative indeed. However, he's distracted in class and he can hardly sit still in class. He will not complete his classwork, does not copy from the board. He's slow at doing almost anything, brushing his teeth, having his breakfast, getting ready to go to school. You name it, he's really, he gets distracted. You have to remind him, you have to keep after him, needs repeated reminders, right? And he keeps losing things on top of that. So on a typical day, let's say, schools have reopened and Shiv has gone back to school and he comes back from there. What is the kind of day that he will have, right? And oftentimes we, have try and evaluate a child's day in terms of what we call marbles of love and rocks of shame, right? So a child like Shiv, what do you think a child, Shiv, will face through the day? What will he get more of, the marbles of love or the rocks of shame? I mean, think about it. I mean, from the morning onwards, he'll probably have to be ticked off, told, shouted at, to every little thing, right? And by the end of the day, oftentimes children like Shiv wonder what they, what they did right throughout the day, because they've been told off so many times, right? And when that happens, then much more than what Shiv is capable of doing, he becomes full of self-doubt. There are so many things, so much of emotional turmoil. He doesn't feel emotionally safe anymore, you see? And so the learning then also begins to suffer. So the same kid who, given a conducive atmosphere, could have thrived in areas of his interest, and Shiv had many, yeah, it all goes down the drain. So what do we do then, right? So we often again talk about in terms of what we call an emotional bank account. Now, some of you might be familiar with this concept. It's Stephen Covey is the first one who spoke of it. So emotional bank account is like any other bank account. You have deposits and you have withdrawals. Yeah. And uh, you can imagine what the deposits might be like. Yeah. So deposits are every time you look and smile at your child genuinely, you give them a hug, you praise or you appreciate something they have done, you spend time with them. All of that are deposits. And withdrawals, you can imagine, could be your stern look, uh, you know, asking them why they did not do this, that, or the other. Expectations, even if you don't speak about them, which the child feels from your side, the shouting and the screaming that sometimes goes on, the criticism that goes on, all those are withdrawals. As you can imagine, as it happens in normal bank accounts, if the deposits are not enough, and if you deposit a check, your check bounces, right? So when your child is actually reacting to you or is slamming the door, that's the check bouncing. And you have to then think about what are the kind of deposits you're making. How do you make them? So because withdrawals you do have to make, you have to put down boundaries. You have to say enough now, you have to shut down the TV, give me your phone, you need to go to sleep, or you better start doing your holiday homework and so on. Those withdrawals will come, and those are all withdrawals, mind you. No child takes those kindly, however good your intentions as a parent might be. They see it as something which is negative, right? They see it as something which is being taken away from them, and it is the withdrawal. So to be able to counter that, you have to have large amounts of deposit. And the question is, how do you do that? I named a few, but there are some other things that one can do, right? Again, we as I said in the initial list of philosophies that I shared with you, that we believe what we focus on grows. And there is a Buddhist saying that the seeds that you water are the seeds that grow. And we believe that all children have good and bad seeds. But when the bad seeds become visible, they rankle us so much. They make us so upset and anxious or angry about it, that's what we begin to focus on. So it could be something like a learning disability in a child, or a child who's seemingly disobedient, let's say, and all our focus goes on to correcting that. And we start doing that, our mind space and a large part of the day is taken over. Say, for instance, in Shiv's case, a large part of the day will get taken over, in his interactions with the world outside, with the work that he hasn't completed, or the thing that his water bottle that he's lost, or the fact that he didn't sit still and he's disturbing others in the class, or the fact that he did not remember to bring back the homework that the teacher had written, and the parents at home are very upset with him, or the fact that he spilled his milk in the morning, and so on. And when that happens, that's what begins to grow. And his own self-image, as well as the story that he carries, is of a boy who is a good for nothing troublemaker, not good in studies. What will become of him? Huge anxieties and fear about his future. And what then happens is the good seeds, and he might have many. Like I said, he might have been good in sports or art or music. He may be a very caring and giving person, but all that is shrouded underneath the negativity. Yeah. And that's what begins to happen in many children's lives who do not fit the typical criteria of being a good girl or a good boy. And that again is something that we have to be very, very mindful about, right? So how do we make the deposits then? Yeah, how do we make the deposits? And there is another philosophy that we take from in this, and that's called a nurtured heart approach. And there is a book written on it. Yeah. And it's very easy to find if you're interested to. So it's called Nurtured Heart Approach, right? And a section of nurtured heart approach talks about recognitions. How do you recognize your child, right? So the first way to recognize it is called active recognition. And this is about some of you who might have seen this movie called Avatar. And Avatar, you know how the Navis greet each other? Like, I see you, right? Where your eyes light up. In fact, your being lights up. And there are people in everybody's lives who you might be able to remember, whether it was a parent, a grandparent, or a teacher, who would light up to see you. And how do you light up to see your child when they wake up? I mean, even if they are, probably not doing all the right things, but the moment they walk in through the door when they're coming back from school, do you ask them, so what's for homework? Did you complete your classwork? Or do you actually light up just for the presence of your child out there? Just to say that I'm so happy that you're there in my life. I'm so happy that you walked into my space again, right? And this can happen again when they wake up. And of course, a lot of the kids are waking up very late. My two young youngsters. One of them is a young adult, the other is a teenager. They don't wake up before noon. And yet we try to do our best when they wake up to light up and say, hey, it's so nice to see you. Good afternoon, right? It's not good morning anymore, but it's so nice to see you. Maintain that eye contact, just to be able to listen, to touch. Fortunately, we can still touch and hug our children, even if we have to maintain social distancing elsewhere. Yeah. So that's active recognition, lighting up and just marveling and rejoicing in the presence of your child. Yeah. And that is called active recognition, right? The second thing is called strength recognition. I see your great qualities. And here again, I'll caution you a bit. It's not just enough to say, oh, you are such a good artist. Oh my God, you act so well, or you're so good in studies. But be more specific about what you are praising and what you're recognizing. So you might say to a child who's really good, doing well in maths, that, I really appreciate the way you try to understand the concepts and how you apply it in your daily life. The other day you were helping Dadi with her accounts and you did such a good job. Your math skills are really showing up in the right places. And the moment you say that, the child knows where to put the effort, right? They know. And again, clearly say what is the area where the child is making the effort. So again, if you're praising a child for football and saying that, oh my God, you will be a superstar, you're like a professional, you can say things like, because that's like a cheerleader, right? You can say, your dribbling skills, which were not that good, is really good. And I can see you're working on your fitness and your stamina has grown. So you will be able to score, I'm sure, more goals this time, right? Be specific. And I value those qualities in you. And that's easy to do because, the qualities in a child, it's quite apparent if you allow them to come out, unlike Shivs perhaps. Yeah. The other thing is called proactive recognition. And here we try and focus on things that are difficult for the child and how with some effort the child is able to do something about it. Let's say Shiv has a little sister, and because of his life, because he's impulsive and because he's also very unhappy perhaps due to the way the world is treating him, he takes out his anger on his sister, right? And on one day when the sister again is provoking him, you find that she was actually not lashed out, but has calmed down and asked his sister to back off. And you immediately enter the scene and say, wow, Shiv, I saw how you control your temper. Because usually he cannot do it, but now he can. It must have taken you a lot of effort to do that. Wow. Just tell me, how did you do that? It's wonderful that you did it, and so on. So that's called proactive recognition. In areas where the child is struggling and they make an effort to do something positive, then you recognize it. And that again goes a long way in helping them feel good about themselves and make effort in difficult areas. Yeah. And the last thing, of course, is called creative recognition. And that's to do with showcasing and highlighting all the things that your child is doing. Like, again, I was talking about children who may not be so good in reading, writing, or calculus, but they may be very good, let's say, in stamp collection, or they may be very good in feeding the puppies in the neighborhood, right? And to be able to record that through pictures, through stories, and to highlight it through, actual pictures which you put up, or, tell his teacher in school that, you know what, Shiv went to this trek with us and he was so good and he took care of everybody out there, and even the other children that were in the group. I wanted you to share these pictures with the rest of the class, how he did this trek, how wonderfully he did it, to be able to again showcase it, highlight it, and building spaces for them to shine, whether it is art, whether it is again something which makes them a giving and kind person, for instance. Yeah. So these are different kinds of recognitions that you can give, and that adds a lot, not only in terms of making the child feel better about themselves, gives them better self-esteem, makes them put more effort in different tasks, etc., but it also fills up that bank account I was talking about. So if you're able to do this, then it is likely that they will actually listen to you, they will actually cooperate with you, they will engage with you in discussions to take collective decisions. Yeah. So again, I love you the way you are. You are unique. You are different. You are you. That's the message to be given. We also often highlight that with an acronym called WOW, which stands for the first W stands for worthy. You're worthy as you are, right? You're original. You're unique, and we marvel at you for that. And the last W is for welcome, and you're welcome into this home, into this house. You're loved, you're cared for without any condition to start with, right? So wow is, if all children got a good dose of wow, then a lot of, I think a lot of the parenting and the education will take care of itself. Yeah. So the second thing that we talk about is coach. And coach is to do with, well, coaching. And this actually goes a long way in helping them build skills. So let's again look at how coaching works, and take the example of, let's say, Ria, who's 14, who's again very bright, intelligent, creative, and so on. But recently, as many kids are, she's spending too much time on social media. Yeah. And she has difficulty waking up before noon. And you can imagine how in so many homes that's such a point of conflict these days, right? Parents trying to control a screening, but feeling helpless completely. What's your problem? She says. Everybody's doing it. There are constant arguments and fights about it. Every day, this is the point of conflict. So what can you do about it? Let's see. Let's have a look at it from a lens called transactional analysis. Again, some of you might be familiar with this. It became very popular in the 70s and 80s. There were books like I'm Okay, You're Okay, Born to Win. Some of you might have actually read it in even management courses and all that, right? What the theory talks about is that all of us carry these different ego states within us. And those are parent, adult, and child. So, I mean, if you look within, you might say that sometimes I'm like a very reasonable, rational person. I'm like an adult, reflective adult. Some other times I'm playful, and sometimes I'm even rebellious against my boss or against my spouse. Yeah. Of course, sometimes I can be really playful and natural and creative. That's also a part of the child, right? Or sometimes with my children or my spouse or other people who need it, I might be a very nurturing parent. I might be very caring and loving, right? But equally, as a parent, I can become critical and judgmental and controlling. So there are two parts to the parent, and as there are two or three parts of the child, the spontaneous, natural child, but also the rebellious child. So what is happening between Ria and her parents? Where do you think the parents are coming from? They're coming from the critical parent. They're saying, you are not going to do this. This is bad for you. How can you do this? How can you be so disobedient? And what do you think that evokes in Ria? It evokes the rebellious child. Yeah. And this is what it looks like. The critical parent hooks the rebellious child. And there is no way forward. It can only lead to more and more conflicts and more withdrawals in your relationship. And if that happens, that things can only get worse. So how can you correct it? What can you do? Of course, you can look after your, bank account, and you can put huge amounts of deposits there, work on the connect, work on your relationships, recognize all the other good things that Ria does through the day and so on, right? And light up to see her, even if she wakes up in the afternoon, right? But at the same time, you might want to deal with it differently. So typically speaking, when the rebellious child comes, as parents, we can either attack by becoming very critical, or back off and say, oh my God, I can't deal with this. You handle it, yeah? Or coach. And what does coaching mean then, right? So coaching is a respectful way of engaging with the child to be able to, and to be able to see the strengths and all the other things that we talked about in connect and in recognition, to be able to help them understand how they can change their lives in the way they want to. Again, the question that we ask often is, how can I mean, is it to do with power? That how can I get my child to do what I want? Or what does my child need for healthy development? And how can those needs be best met by me, right? And indeed, if it's a second question that you're asking, chances are that you will be able to have conversations on an adult to adult basis, right? And you might still be able to start with, a nurturing parent, for instance, and these are the 5 steps for coaching that we often talk about. First is empathetic listening. So to ask Ria, my God, are you okay waking up at 2 o'clock? Doesn't your day completely go, you know, uh, out of control? How do you feel about it? And then listen and genuinely listen. Or it must be very hard to day after day, not see daylight at all. I mean, no, not see the morning at all. I wonder how that must be, right? And the moment Ria is beginning to talk, your child is beginning to talk, drop all the other expectations, the judgments, etc., and just listen and try and understand the child's point of view, right? Of course, you have to, as a coach, understand the unique wiring. There are kids who will be more given to the screen now. There will be children who will tend to have more tantrums and anger outbursts, because that's how they're wired. They're impulsive. They're on the edge. There are children who will become more anxious during these times more than others, and it's important to accept that to start with. right? And they will be good in some things, and to be able to see where they're good at, how they can overcome it. So a sensitive, anxious child may also have a very reasonable and empathetic mind. And you might be able to tap into that to be able to counter both, right? And so those are things that you can do. And of course, rather than telling them what to do, ask them. So are you okay with this? What do you want to do? Do you want to do anything differently? Can I help you in that? And so on. And when you are asking those questions, neutrally, mind you, right? So not like, so, of course, the tone matters so much indeed, I mean, you can ask a question which can sound extremely judgmental also, and you have to be careful with that. But if you are indeed neutral in asking that question, then you're more likely to get an answer which is more rational and engaging, so to say, right? So yeah, I mean, again, if we think of Ria, and you can get into, firstly, start by from the nurturing parent and say that, you missed out on lovely morning we had, the birds were in the balcony, and we were really missing you this morning. But anyhow, how are you feeling? Do you want to sit and talk about whether you want to change the routine at all, or something like that, right? And then she might respond, yeah, no, maybe sometimes yes, sometimes no, but eventually I'm sure she will engage with this conversation. And then once you have nurtured her, come down to the adult and say that, how do you think, how does it matter? I was reading some articles, and these articles said that if you don't sleep at night, you never get that kind of quality sleep. And that interferes with your learning and your moods as well. I wonder whether it's beginning to interfere with your moods now, right? And the moment you come from a position of objectivity, of compassion and objectivity, you're much more likely to engage the child in the conversation. After you have, and then the child, Ria, or Shiv or Aryan, says that, yes, I think I've been thinking about it. I've done my own reading, and this is what it says. You know what? The research also says that during this time, it doesn't matter so much. Then listen and say, oh, really? Perhaps we could read it together, the COVID times, haven't you seen what's happening throughout the world? And it's true. It is actually, to accept that. And then get into a respectful skill building collaboration, one step at a time. And eventually, Ria might say that, yeah, okay, fair enough. I think I'll make it a point to wake up before 12. Then how do you do that, right? How do you, so if she's waking up at 2 these days, she can't start waking up at 8 tomorrow. Absolutely not going to happen. Or 10 or 11 even, yeah? At best, what she could do is probably say 12, maybe 11:30, right? So one step at a time. In any kind of skill building, whether it is math, whether it's football, whether it is anger management, you have to take one step at a time. Oftentimes what we say is that, you can help the child scale it. So scaling is something that we do in therapy as well, and say that in this particular area, let's say anger management, in a scale of 0 to 10, where are you? And again, Shiv might say, I'm at a 3, right? Are you happy at 3? No, I'm not. I hit my sister too often. And then you might say, so where do you want to be? He says, I want to be at 8. I want to control my anger completely. And you could say that, how long do you think you will reach? It will take you to reach 8. And so be realistic about it. You cannot jump from 3 to 8 overnight. It will probably take you 6 months, 1 year, if you work consistently with it. So you can say, okay, so what is the next step? How do you reach 3.5 or 4? How long will it take? What are the steps you need to take to reach there? What can you do? Can you do some deep breathing? Can you do some thinking? Can you can you just walk away when you feel angry? What are the kind of steps that you can take, right? And then you have that respectful skill building thing, which you put into practice. And also ask the child, do you need any help with it? Do you want us to put reminders for you, right? Do you want to step in when this happens? When your sister is provoking you or something like that, right? And then you might be able to. And when the success comes, again, the goals have to be realistic. When the success comes, then there's added confidence. The child tries harder the next time. Because, one of my teachers, when I was doing my MD in psychiatry, used to say, nothing succeeds like success. If you're able to help the child to succeed with a degree of effort and support, the next time you'll find a much more eager, willing, and confident child to try that again, right? So these are the few steps that we use to do coaching. And again, in today's times, there may be many such things you can break down to skills. So emotional issues can also be brought down, broken down into skills and then worked upon. Yeah. So the third thing is care, and care is about how much care uh, are you, care is about yourself. Are you taking care of yourself? And particularly in today's times, it's absolutely vital, because the pandemic has affected us. It's actually impacted all of us in such deep and profound ways that we don't understand yet. And it shows in our anxiety, in our worries, in our behaviors, in the way that we catastrophize the future. How does it impact us, right? And we have to think about it, and we have to find a space to be able to give vent to it, to discuss it, and to take care with your own hobbies. And we'll discuss a little more about the pandemic itself and what are the kind of things that one can do. But taking care of yourself, you have to have the mind space, the time to be able to do that, right? We often talk about PQ, and PQ is playfulness quotient. What is your playfulness quotient like? Maybe you should scale it right now and say that this is my, and maybe try and increase it a bit, because playing is one of the short ways of taking care of stress. It is also a very good way of connecting to your children, and also to adults sometimes, right? So what is your playfulness quotient indeed? So taking care of yourself, and we might be able to spend some time, if anybody wishes, later. Community is the fourth one, and I think in today's times it's vital. Again, when stress levels become high, when there is a disaster, when there is something that destroys the very fabric of our society, we can do two things. And that's exactly how you see things are panning out in our world outside, or in families even. You can get polarized completely and start blaming each other for it, like politicians do, or organizations do, and so on, right? Or you can come together as a community, as schools can do, as your school is extending this opportunity to interact, to be together even during the summer holidays. During disaster times, school is often central to the rebuilding of society. When the Gujarat earthquake took place in 2002, and some of the villages and small towns were completely ground to dust, the first people who were invited to come and rebuild it was the school. And schools put up massive tents and they invited the children back, right? And that's where, through artwork and through music and the togetherness, the community came back together. So school has a very, very important role to play here, and the collaboration between school and parent community, and indeed form a bigger, larger community, is vital indeed. Yeah. So again, this is a African saying which we really like. Ubuntu. Ubuntu means I am, because we are. We are connected in uh, to each other, to nature, to institutions outside, to so many different things. And we it's so hard to see ourselves as individuals, particularly in times like this. We are in it together, and that's a very important message to carry with us in times like this. And of course, commit as parents, right? Commitment takes compassion, courage, compassion and courage. So parenting can't be a remote thing. You have to get down into the trenches, roll up your sleeves, and say, I'm here 24/7. And of course, there are other things to do, I know, in life, and I'm sure that many of you are grappling with your professions and offices reopening, and I don't know what all you have had to face due to the pandemic, but parenting has to remain very central in your lives if you're parents, I think. And that comes with this deep commitment that you tell yourself about, that I'm in it for our own self, for the family, and for, of course, for the children, right? So again, coming back to these times, the pandemic, what do we do? I mean, we can attempt do our best to remain anchored with a sense of self-belongingness, purpose, and meaning in our lives, right? We can try and create a structure at home, connect to our roots. We can reclaim the purpose and meaning that many of us have lost, connect to the vision, as I say, and question the given, question so many things we had taken for granted in our lives. I think we must question during times like these. I think governments should, institutions should, everybody should question what we had made this behemoth of what we call our civilization. What was it doing to the world indeed, and to ourselves, really, right? So create a structure at home, connecting to roots. Again, if your connect is good, if you have good family times, you can actually sit down and, through fun and games and deliberations and chat, talk about each individual's needs. What do they need to do as in the role that they are in, right? Like as a student, as a professional, as a breadwinner, as a homemaker, as a teacher. What is your role right now? And even despite the shutdown and despite the summer holidays, you carry that role, because that gives you an identity and a purpose. What do you do with that role? How do you, so a student who does not have classes anymore might decide to, again, there is often holiday homework and stuff, which, but they could also be, watching, good educational videos, or TED Talks, or read something which is related, or have a debate about something, a topic that you really like as a student, and so on, right? And so how do you factor that in the day, right? So and equally, what are your responsibilities with the household chores, or what are the kind of things that give you joy through the day, right? And to be able to have a structure which is loosely held, and each individual says, okay, I want to do this to have fun tomorrow, and this is what I'll do as a student, right? And this is what I'll do to help, uh, you know at home. And again, you can have lists of things. As a student, I have these 10 things that I can do. In my entertainment, I have other 10 things. In terms of chore, I maybe have 4 or 5 things that I could do, right? And each day, each evening, maybe plan the next day, and loosely, that too, without any kind of feeling of oppression or imposition from the top to the bottom. A loosely fitting structure where you spend some time doing each one of these 3 roles, right? And also spend some time with the family. So you can have cooperation and family time within this. Like, for instance, cooking a nice meal. Like yesterday, we had a meal where all of us got together, and it was a Sunday evening, and we created a meal like you are served in a restaurant, which are very nice spread and with candlelight and all of that. We can't go to restaurants now, at least we haven't decided to yet, but we can do that at home, and everybody does their little bits to be able to do that. So to have for each individual their own schedule, and that schedule might not be in keeping with how you had expected your children to be during holidays or during school time, because times are different now. The 2.5 months lockdown was a time when children would have finished their final exams in respective classes. Some would have finished their board exam, gone for family holidays, had loads and loads of fun with their friends, gone out, etc. None of that has happened. And if that has not happened, the repair that happens of mind and body and soul, that hasn't happened either. So it's probable that will impact them in some way or the other. And for them to carry on with the way they did in previous years is not going to be possible. So you have to cut some slack for that, isn't it? Cut some slack for that. And you if we are able to do that, if you are able to um, give that accommodations and allowance, I think our children will be that much happier and feel much more understood. Yeah. The second thing is, of course, to reclaim purpose and meaning, connect to your vision. And of course, that can happen through, again, reflection and brainstorming, some individual and some collective. Some could be each person's individual time and what they strive to do, and to feel connected with different spaces. Now, you cannot go to all the spaces, although it's opening up. I think people are being very, very cautious indeed, and rightly so. And so what do you do at home? What do you do with the digital media? And what do you do with the limited freedom that we now have to be able to connect to these things, digging into the crevices of the mind, of past memory, looking at motives? There are a few things that we have done at our own home I can share, is that we have looked at the videos. Now, watching videos had gone out of the window because of Netflix and Amazon Prime and so on. But now we suddenly find that it's a treasure trove of videos and books. When children were little, we used to read these books to them. So we, one day we had a ritual where everybody would choose their favorite childhood book, and they would read it out for the rest of the family. It was wonderful. It was so heartwarming. And it makes us, again, revisit the stories that make us, revisit those wonderful warm moments, right? Bringing back memories and meaning and joining the dots and making stories. It's so important. Reconnect to deep connections again, which is, again, to do with people, with hobbies, with spaces which are creative, make creative spaces, storytelling, board games, cooking together, all of that. And of course, nurture your PQ, your playfulness quotient. If you're able to do that, I think some of that loss that we have felt over the last couple of months will gradually begin to return. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are probably doing it already, right? And then, of course, I believe it is a time when it is a time to question the given, because the COVID-19 has rattled our lives and made us question everything, really. I mean, what have we done to our planet? During the lockdown, the levels of pollution plummeted in NCR, and you could see the stars bright and beautiful in the sky again. So refreshing, you know. Look at the greenery outside these days. I've never seen NCR green like this in the last 20 years. And when politicians turn around and say, no, 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 it's not the industries or the traffic that does it, it's the winds from the northwest, I don't believe them anymore, because you can see it's living proof that if we stop actually doing what we do on a regular basis, the planet revives itself. Birds have started coming to our balcony much more often, and there are peacocks in the park in front. Can you believe that? That's amazing, isn't it? And it also, of course, tells us that thankfully, whatever we do to Mother Earth, it will revive itself if we take a step backwards. So that's really refreshing. So we have to scrutinize our institution and rehash our priorities because of what it has taught us in these last 2 months. Intense learning can happen. What should we strive for now, right? What is success after all? Is it about climbing the corporate ladder and getting a Merc or a BMW by the time you're 30? Or is it about connecting to more meaningful things in life? What is development? Is development the name of polluting and completely destroying our earth, due to which we have had this infection in the first place, in the kind of exotic wildlife markets that it came from, and the kind of pollution? And that's why the cyclone came in eastern India, and the one from the western coast. Everywhere things are just crumbling. What is development about? We need to ask that, right? Question the materialism, challenge the polarization. Should we seek to return to how things were, or create a new normal? I mean, a lot of people talk about a new normal, but I still don't know what that is. I think we have to create it. If we allow things just to settle the way it will and just accept it, I think it will be tragic. I think it's an opportunity to create a new normal in very proactive ways, and count what we should be grateful for, right? Ask if less is indeed more. With that, I'm going to show you this picture of this book that I've taken the 5C model from. It's called All You Need Is Love. It's a parenting book, which you can also download on any digital format from Amazon. And I'm going to stop my share. And I do have, beyond the storm, there's always stillness. And then you can see the beauty, as you can see in the slide, right? So thank you very much for listening. And now I'm ready to take any questions if there are.
I think thank you so much, Dr. Sen, for this very enlightening talk that you gave us this morning. I think some of the things that I can take back from what you just mentioned is the importance of feedback. Be very specific as far as your feedback is concerned, because feedback will help you to take things forward. And I think at the Paraswar School, with Mrs. Narang around, this is something that we keep emphasizing for our teachers. And I think it's very, very important for the parents too. The other thing that you talked about is ask questions, think critically, try and understand what this world is all about. And for parents to work and understand, put yourself into the shoes of a child and think from the child's perspective and act and not react is what I gather. There's just a question that I would like to ask you from the school perspective is that in this pandemic, what is your suggestion that you would give to all our teachers who are also part of this webinar right now, to parents and teachers? How do we work hand in hand and reduce the stress for the children? You know, we are stressed out ourselves, and I think inadvertently we do pass on our stresses to the children. So what is it that we can do as a school, as parents, to reduce that stress? Some strategies, if you could help us.
So I think from school's point of view, since you are looking at education in the form of holistic education, so academics forms a part of it, I'm presuming, isn't it? However, given the usual climate in our world, in India particularly, the academic stress is by far the maximum, and the expectations from it, right? And I think that's what you as a community of teachers and parents could look at, what to cut down on. I know there are, prescribed books and curriculum and stuff like that, but there are schools to interpret it in different ways, in the pace at which they go. And indeed, a large part of the curriculum might be completely redundant and useless. In fact, the other day I was in another forum with the ex-chairperson of CBSE who had brought the reforms, Mr. Ashok Ganguly. And he clearly in public said that 40% of the curriculum is redundant, useless, 40%. And if we don't, so that's nearly half, right? And so to be able to cut down on that, on the academic pressure, on what you want to teach, what are the basic academic skills that you want to teach, and what are the rest of what the kid or the child will learn on their own from their own interest is in question. That delicate balance is very important, I think. So the academic expectations, again, is something that as a community that you can work on. I know of schools who have tried to do that, and many times the opposition, again, perhaps not so surprisingly, comes from the parents. And and they are the ones who get anxious. How can you do this? You know, the curriculum has all this. How can you cut it down? Not realizing that that actually makes the job not just for teachers but for their own children much tougher. You know, to be able to plod through all of that, memorize, cram it, for no benefit, honestly. Right? I mean, you know, in fact, the schools I know who have been more flexible and who have given time for, you know, their young people to do it at their own pace. Other schools which have kids who do very well eventually, get into the best colleges, you know, and do very creative, productive things with their lives, you know, as opposed to things that are, conventional and down the beaten path.
Stereotyped.
Stereotyped. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
That's one thing I would definitely ask, you know, strongly recommend that you look at, right? And of course, look at the other stuff where, you know, again, I would urge all parents to look at what makes their child tick. So there are some of you who may have children who are very well-rounded, who fit into the school system very well. They're the so-called conventionally good boys and girls who will listen in class, take down, do their classwork, you know, are responsible in many ways, have other talents also perhaps other than academics. But there are so many, perhaps the majority of kids, who have a smattering of this, that, and the other. And to be able to hold on and to highlight what the talents are, what the strengths are, and what are those seeds. Make a very conscious effort to water those seeds, and not the ones which brings the negativity and the anxiety and the anger and the frustration, right? No doubt those need to be addressed, and there are ways of addressing it. And together with school, you can take it to your teacher, you can take it to the year coordinator and say, how do we deal with the fact that my child is hardly ever completing classwork? It's important to address it, and there are ways of addressing it, but that can't be the central thing in the child's life. That's the other thing that I would strongly recommend for parents.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is being a typical shepherd and not leave any sheep behind. Take the ones who, so look out for those who are straying out and find out what's causing them to stray and bring them back to the focus.
Or be like a gardener where, you know, a gardener knows which plant needs what. So some plants need more water, some need more sunlight, some needs a little support to twine around, you know, and you give those, or some two plants need a symbiotic relationship to grow together. So there can be support like that, you know, metaphorically between students and or other systems in school. So to know that we can do our best as gardeners, as parents, and the rest we'll have to leave up to the, you know, leave to the children to do. Just like plants grow up, children will also grow up if we are able to create that climate for them.
Yeah, and I think you emphasize that listening, you know, to be an empathetic listener is the most important thing, not only as parents, but also as teachers. And I think if we actually listen, and listening is not only to the verbal listening, it is also to the body listening, where you listen to the language of the body, which will help bringing out. I don't think there are very many questions from parents, which obviously means that you have been so articulate. No, there is one question that has come up is, how do I let the board understand and encourage her what she needs to study at home?
So I'll respond to that in a bit, but, you know, carrying on from what you were saying about empathetic listening, I think that what, as parents, as teachers, when a child brings a problem, you know, expresses something which is either emotional or practical, which is creating a problem in their lives, our first instinct is to resolve it immediately. I think if we feel that it's our responsibility as a parent or a teacher to do it, our anxiety takes over. And we immediately look for solutions and say, oh, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? The child may not be looking for that at all. What the child is looking for is your understanding. So to be able to first, like you said, listen with your ears, your body and your soul, and take it in and experience it and say, okay, now I understand what you must be going through. now I understand why you didn't want to take the bus, because of the bullying that you were facing, and how you could not even talk about it because then other people would call you a telltale. I understand that now deeply. And let's see what we can do together. So the solution comes later. First the understanding, first the listening, first the empathy. Yeah. And sorry, so the question was about how to prepare the child for the boards?
No. It is how do I let my ward understand and encourage her that she needs to study at home. She is just 5 years old right now, and if I force her, she starts crying. Oh dear. I think a 5-year-old child really doesn't need to be forced into studying.
Yeah. So what you can do, you can make the study time conducive to activities that are related to study. It may not be studies per se. You can say we have a desk time. So like we were talking about how to make a schedule, even a 5-year-old can be asked and talked through to tell them, to ask them what their preferences are. So she might say that I want to play with my dolls or my crayons, or I want to make something, or I want to go and feed the birds, and I want to play with my brother or sister, and I want you to play a board game with me. And I also want to help you in the kitchen, mama. I want to, sort out the onions from the potatoes. She might say that. And you say, fine, we'll bring all that into this thing, but there will be a time when we will, of course, a family time to eat, and there will be a desk. So there can be a flow time where we'll all sit down together and bring in creative activities, and you can choose what you want to do, but there will be a desk time as well. And in the desk time, you can have, again, some bit of coloring material, some storytelling, some books, and you can say, okay, what do you want to choose? So you make the child choose what they want to choose, even when they're sitting on the desk. Yeah. And then after they've done it, and then say, you know what, I saw this book with numbers in it, and it was so interesting. They're telling a story with numbers. Do you want to look at that? And the chances are that she will not cry, and probably will look at it because she's in the flow of things, and also get used to the rhythm and routine of having a desk time. And that will actually form the basis, the roots of study time later. That's what I'd say.
I think there's another question, Dr. Sen, where a parent would like to understand more on the PQ in learning. Any tips on how
PQ in learning? Yeah. So again, I think playing is something that is very reparative. It heals us, right? And that's why we often say all the children at one end are very vulnerable on the face of all the stress and anxiety and uncertainty we have. But you'll find that when children go through stress, they also play out that. Sometimes the stress is played out. When they play, they actually mimic, or they actually bring again, after disasters, etc., after tsunamis, earthquakes, when children play, they will bring their play in, the event into their play, right? But more importantly, you'll find that suppose you take them to a doctor and they get an injection. There'll be a lot of crying and, a lot of anxiety at that moment. But immediately after that, the child gets up and starts running and playing and jumping. What do you think that does to the child? It actually helps them to heal from that trauma that they went through, right? And I don't think as adults we are able to do that as effectively. We lose the ability to play and have fun spontaneously. Just see the lighter side of things, just joke, so all that comes under playfulness. So it could be, just putting on some music and dancing, joining your children and enter the world. In fact, it's a great opportunity to enter their world. Some children may, let's say, for instance, play video games, and most of us adults don't know what. Sorry? Oh. So a lot of us may not, know much about that. In fact, most adults frown upon video games and say that's a waste of time. If you did that, it's a waste of time. Now, if we wanted to also have some fun and also enter their world to see what it's all about, you might want to join them and play a video game for some time. You'll get a better understanding of it. You'll probably have some fun with your child, and at the same time, be able to more decisively tell them that next time, you play this video game and you have to stop, I know where you could stop because I know the game too, right?
Yeah.
So it may have many benefits. Yeah. So playfulness quotient indeed is the ability to, let your hair down, see the lighter side of things, actually play without any agenda. So, many times when parents play with children, they do it because they want them to teach, learn something. They're playing with an agenda to learn to count or to learn colors. Take all that out. If you would really want to be playful, you need to get into your own natural child where there is no agenda of learning, of expectations. That's when you can actually wholeheartedly play. And children are very smart. the moment you actually start trying to teach them through play, within 2-3 times they'll know, and they won't want to play with you anymore, because they know what's coming their way, right? Yeah. Even children with disabilities, we work with, the moment they realize that they're the therapist or the parent is wanting to play with them because they want to take them through this, most of them would refuse. Yeah.
I think, thank you so very much, Dr. Sen, for giving us this valuable time and talking to us. I'm sure parents have taken a lot of tips from you, and hopefully we will be able to tide through this time. Being positive, trying to be happy, trying to make sure that we take things in stride, and most important, not allowing our stress to get on to the children.
Yeah.
Understanding that they themselves are going through stress. And this is what I keep telling most of the parents, that, when you look back and reflect on your own childhood, we were allowed to play, we were allowed to do 101 things, which today our own children cannot. So look at this, look at it from the child's perspective, see it from the child's point of view, and help and support them.
Indeed.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr.
It's a really, really great time that I had. Thank you so much for listening and posing these questions to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to be a part of this.
So thank you, dear parents. I hope you did find this very, very enriching and valuable. I'm sure, there are lots of takeaways from this session. Just to remind you that we also have another webinar coming up on Saturday, which is with a doctor, a pediatrician, as well as a psychologist on Saturday, where they will be talking to us and helping us to understand how to deal with these difficult times. So I look forward to seeing you all again, and stay safe, stay healthy. Everything is so fluid at this point in time. One really doesn't know how things are going to go forward. My personal view is, and this is personally my view, that it has thrown each one of us completely off guard. You really don't know that you plan something today and tomorrow it's completely redundant. So you are rediscovering yourself every single day. And but as I said, that when you start rediscovering yourself, you realize that there are so many strengths that you have within you, which help you to cope up. So look forward, and I think grades 6 to 10, students from grades 6 to 10 will be having a session on next Monday, where they will be addressing to the questions and the queries and the stresses of children. So have a great day. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to more such sessions, and parent feedback is always welcome. We look forward to feedback from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Really, very enlightening for us also. I think a lot of things we tend to overlook. It's been a revisit for us also. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, ma'am, because I think it is a good recap for what we know, but we hardly practice, So thank you so much.
You're welcome.